On a September morning in 2023, in a Whitehall meeting room, a deal was struck. £500 million of public money changed hands, not to save Port Talbot's blast furnaces, to close them. Cassius Walker Hunt found out the way most of Port Talbot did, via a press release. He was a fourth-generation steel worker. His great-grandfather had worked the same site, so had his grandfather, and so had his father. The line ended with a government announcement he was not invited to. Here is the question this video will answer. How does the country that launched the Industrial Revolution end up paying to dismantle the last of it? And what does it mean that Britain can no longer make its own steel from scratch? Start with the Forth Bridge. Completed in 1890, it took 54,000 tons of steel. Every ton of it was British, smelted, rolled and shipped by a country that, at that moment, produced more steel than the rest of the world combined. Not more than Europe, more than the entire world. It was not a coincidence. It was the industrial logic of a nation that had built global trade on iron and fire and had not finished yet. Port Talbot was part of that same logic, though it came later. The Abbey Steelworks opened in 1951, built on 32,000 piles driven into coastal sand and peat before a single structural element could go up. At its peak in the early 1960s, it directly employed 18,000 workers, making it the largest single employer in Wales. Nothing else came close. Workers came from everywhere. From the South Wales valleys, where coal was contracting. From Scotland and the north of England, following the work the way workers always follow it. From Jamaica, because Port Talbot in the 1950s offered steady wages and a community you could actually build a life in. The Sandfields estate rose from bare sand dunes to house them, thousands of families on streets that had not existed a decade before. They called the town Treasure Island. The wages were among the best available to any manual worker in Britain. They meant it without irony, because the treasure was real and they had found it. Nationalisation arrived in 1967 under Harold Wilson's government, consolidating the industry into the British Steel Corporation. Over 268,000 employees and roughly 90% of UK steel-making capacity were under one roof. The logic was sound: coordination, scale, national investment. But a system built for permanence in a world already starting to move carried its own risk. Japan and West Germany were rebuilding their steel industries from the ground up with modern infrastructure designed for efficiency from day one. Britain was adapting aging sites. The gap was not visible in the output figures. It was accumulating in the cost base, quietly, year by year. Then came January the 2nd, 1980. 100,000 steel workers walked out simultaneously, the largest coordinated industrial action in post-war British history. They stayed out for 3 months. They returned after accepting 15.5% below the rate of inflation, and within months of that return, Port Talbot lost 6,000 jobs in a restructuring the industry called the Slimline Formula, and the town called something else entirely. Treasure Island became Gyro City, but the furnaces kept burning. The question was never whether Port Talbot could survive a crisis. It was whether anyone in power would let it. Margaret Thatcher privatised British Steel in 1988. By that point, the workforce had already been cut from around 150,000 in 1980 to roughly 40,000. That was not mismanagement. It was deliberate ideology, the belief that a state industry existing outside market discipline was a problem to be corrected, not a strategic asset to be protected. The correction was thorough. Port Talbot survived it, but smaller, and the communities built around the larger workforce did not survive it at all. Then Blair and Brown. In 1999, British Steel merged with Dutch firm Hugovens to form Chorus. 7 years later, in 2007, Tata Group bought Chorus for £6.7 billion. An Indian conglomerate, one of the largest in the world, now owned the steelworks that had once built the backbone of post-war Wales. Neither the merger nor the acquisition came with strategic conditions. No protections on primary steelmaking capacity, no requirements to keep blast furnace operations running, no clause tying investment to the communities that depended on the site. The deal was done. The money changed hands. British Steel passed into foreign ownership without anyone in government treating it as a decision that required safeguards. The decisive moment came under Cameron. In 2015 and 2016, as Chinese steel flooded global markets at prices below the cost of production, the EU prepared anti-dumping tariffs to give European producers some protection. Britain blocked them. The reason given was maintaining free trade credentials. The effect was that Port Talbot started losing £1 million a day. Tata announced it might walk away from its UK operations entirely. The site came within weeks of closure. Government intervention kept it running, but the underlying problem, a plant that could not compete with state-backed Chinese production at those prices, did not go away. It just got deferred. For a steelworker like Cassius Walker Hunt, 2015 was not an economic bulletin. It was the year the question he'd never had to ask himself became impossible to ignore. That's the through line. 70 years. Every party that held power. Not a conspiracy, not even a coordinated failure. Something more mundane and harder to fix. No government of any colour ever treated steel as a strategic national asset at the moment it actually mattered. Each found a reason not to act. Thatcher found ideology. Blair and Brown found the logic of globalization. Cameron found free trade optics. Each decision made the next one harder to reverse. By September 2023, the Sunak government and Tata Steel reached an agreement. That included £500 million in public grants toward a £1.25 billion investment in an electric arc furnace at Port Talbot. The announcement was presented as green investment, a transition to lower carbon steelmaking, a modernisation, a future. The unions weren't in the room when the deal was finalised. The alternative proposal, keeping one blast furnace running until 2032 to bridge the gap while the electric arc furnace was built, had already been rejected in private Whitehall meetings before any public announcement was made. Port Talbot found out what had been decided the same way it had always found out, after the fact. On January the 18th, 2024, Tata confirmed both furnaces would close, with 2,800 jobs gone. The number had been 3,000 in earlier estimates. The precision did not make it easier. On September the 30th, 2024, Blast Furnace 4 tapped its last liquid iron. Cassius Walker Hunt was on shift. 4 generations of his family had worked that site. The line ended, not with a ceremony, not with any formal acknowledgement of what was closing, but with a furnace going cold, and men who had spent their working lives inside it walking out for the last time. The scale of what ended that day, over 100 years of primary steelmaking in Wales, received the kind of quietness that the occasion did not deserve. The deal was done, the furnaces went cold, and Britain was left with a promise that an electric arc furnace arriving in 2027 would make everything right. Except the numbers do not quite add up. Here is what the government wants you to believe about what comes next. A £1.25 billion electric arc furnace, operational by late 2027, cutting emissions at Port Talbot by 90%. 5,000 jobs secured across Tata's UK operations. Construction began in July 2025. The green steel era begins, Port Talbot leads it, and the closure of the blast furnaces becomes, in retrospect, a necessary step towards something better. That is the official story, and parts of it are true, but there is a problem sitting underneath it that nobody in Whitehall is keen to say out loud. Britain generates 10 million tonnes of scrap steel every year, more than enough in theory to feed a new generation of electric arc furnaces. The electric arc furnace process works by melting recycled scrap using electric current, no iron ore, no coking coal, far fewer emissions. On paper, Britain has the raw material sitting right there, except it does not, because over 80% of the scrap Britain generates gets loaded onto ships and exported, mostly to Turkey, where it is melted in electric arc furnaces, turned into finished steel and sold back to British construction projects. Britain throws away the input, imports the output, and calls that a supply chain. The new Port Talbot electric arc furnace will need roughly 2 million additional tonnes of electric arc furnace ready scrap per year from 2027. The problem is not the quantity. Britain produces enough scrap in theory. The problem is that the infrastructure to process it domestically has never been built. Most of what gets exported is low-grade, mixed, contaminated, not electric arc furnace ready, without significant processing that the UK currently cannot do at scale. So Britain may end up importing refined scrap or direct reduced iron to feed the furnace it just paid £1.25 billion to build. That is not a green transition. That is a different dependency. Then there is the electricity. Electric arc furnaces run on it. UK industrial electricity prices are among the highest in Europe, a structural disadvantage that British Steel has called severe in submissions to government. The government's own British Industrial Competitiveness Scheme, designed to reduce energy costs for steel producers, does not come into effect until April 2027. And even with subsidies, UK electricity costs remain significantly higher than Germany and France, where steel competitors are operating. The furnace that was supposed to solve Port Talbot's cost problem runs on the one input where Britain is least competitive. To understand the scale of the gap between what Britain says it values and what it actually does, consider HS2. In the year to April 2024, Britain's largest infrastructure project in a generation spent over £100 million on steel made outside the UK. Or consider the Lower Thames crossing, an £11 billion tunnel beneath the Thames, the most expensive road project in British history. In February 2026, it was reported to be built with foreign steel. The Department for Transport could not confirm that a single UK-made ton would go into it. A government pledge, a British project. No answer. The government's own March 2026 steel strategy, published with considerable fanfare, set an ambition of making 50% of Britain's steel domestically. The world's first industrialised nation, the country that gave the world the blast furnace, the railway, the modern steelworks, setting itself the target of making half its own steel. That number is not a boast, it's a confession. Jack Harper is 28. He joined Tata as an apprentice after leaving the army, because the steelworks seemed like somewhere permanent, somewhere that would still be there. He was laid off in September 2024. He said some have worked there their entire working lives and some have never written a CV. That line contains everything that a transition plan does not. The retraining schemes, the redundancy packages, the transition board. None of it addresses what it means to be a man in his 50s who learned one trade, gave it 30 years, and is now being asked to start again in an economy that does not need what he knows. And then Scunthorpe. In April 2025, Keir Starmer recalled Parliament to pass emergency legislation nationalising British Steel at Scunthorpe, the last blast furnaces left operating in Britain, after Chinese owner Jingye threatened to walk away overnight. The government that had let Port Talbot go, that had signed off on closing primary steelmaking in Wales, spent £377 million to keep Scunthorpe's furnaces running at £1.3 million a day, with no repayment schedule and no end date. 2 sites, 2 decisions, 1 country trying to work out, too late, what steel was actually worth. Britain built the Forth Bridge with its own steel and its own hands. It now sets itself the ambition of making half of what it uses. There is a fragment of Margam Abbey still standing inside the Port Talbot site boundary. It was there when the first piles went into the ground in the 1940s. It was there when the last furnace went cold in 2024. It will be there when the electric arc furnace starts up in 2027. The furnaces are cold, the piles are still in the ground. A country that cannot make its own steel from scratch is a country that depends on someone else's decisions. That is not an industrial problem, it is a sovereignty problem. If you want more honest accounts of how Britain lost the industries that built it, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you.